yourself. What's your, briefly, your professional background, fun fact about you, and what's the company you represent?
Sure, I guess I'll get started first. Hi everyone, my name is Tian Tian Feng. I'm currently an investor at Cherry Ventures, which is a 150 million early stage fund based actually here in Berlin. Although we're based here in Germany, we actually invest all over Europe. Before I guess I moved over on the investing side, I spent a couple years in consulting, but then quickly moved over to Apple, where I actually was responsible for commercializing battery technology for iPad. And that was kind of the first time that I really made a foray into the global supply chain management world. And there I spent around 400 million in spend on everything within the battery supply chain. And obviously, because we're at Apple, we're not really buying AAA or AA batteries off the shelf. So I actually led the entire process from design, so everything from ID from Johnny Ive's team to all the prototyping, and then obviously all of the bringing up the manufacturing facilities, so actually bringing up all the automation. And then obviously launched 5 products there, and then moved over to Europe because I thought the lifestyle here sounded appealing, and after a couple of years in Silicon Valley, thought it's a really interesting way to kind of move and see a different tech ecosystem.
Hey, my name is Chris. I'm working with the Northzone. My background, I had a couple of touch points in logistics over my career. I started in investment banking, was actually focusing on an industry team, transportation and logistics, and we advise companies on M&A, etc. Then I decided banking is not my world where I see myself long term. Started my own company in London, completely different field. Ran that for 3 years, exited end of 2015. And then switched to the dark side again at Northzone. And here, one of my first investment was in a logistic company, Freight Hub. So closing the loop today again. And yeah, we're very excited about the opportunities in this space. Very briefly on Northzone, we're a global VC with a transatlantic angle, investing across Europe as well as the US. We're currently investing from a fund of 350 million, investing typically in Series A and B. Companies that we're known for is one of the big ones which we exited earlier this year, is Spotify, where we led the Series A, made some good returns for our investors. We were also invested in iZettle, which was also an exit earlier this year, so we had a pretty good year so far. And trying to find more of these companies now, hopefully in the logistic world.
Yeah, it's funny because Freight Hub is also a portfolio company of ours, so Northzone is actually the Series A investor after our seed round.
Cool. Why is logistics such an interesting industry to you? I mean, we have lots of people from logistics in the room, so probably they all love the industry they are working in. But from your point of view, why is logistics hot at the moment? And where? Because logistics is so large, right?
Yeah, I think, from a venture capital perspective, is we really like big markets and big opportunities. And I think logistics is just in so many aspects, just a massive market. At the same time, you see a lot of fragmentation in that market. You have container shipping, parcels. You see many players there. There is literally no dominant player in all of these segments. And then they're actually not very digitized yet. I mean, it's big corporations that have grown traditionally a lot through M&A, which also makes it very difficult through these organizations to push innovation and push similar IT standard. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunity for newcomers to disrupt these big players and to offer services that are way superior to what the incumbents can do. And I think that really gets us excited about logistics in general. I think what we're seeing in terms of where we're excited, and I think we have seen some of the startups earlier on stage, I think consumer focus is a bit or the the standards that consumers have for services that companies provide are getting higher and higher. And when we look at Amazon, like with their service level, like people are used to getting their parcels delivered on time, almost like within a day or in a couple of hours. We personally believe like consumers get used to that, and they expect that from almost everybody in the market. At the same time, not everybody can provide that service at the moment. Amazon is big, and they have all that sophistication in their supply chain and last mile delivery. But they will probably not like get the entire market, so there will always like be a long tail of like companies existing, but they really struggle to compete with them. And then there are companies like Bird come into play who offer them ability to compete with them, and that's on the last mile, but also like we saw some companies in the past which we look closely at in the trucking space, where traditionally you have like a lot of underutilization of assets, and you ask yourselves like with technology you can actually solve a lot of that underutilization. And there are a lot of like marketplaces popping up right now that get a lot of traction, that actually are effective in increasing the utilization of the existing capacities, and that hasn't been possible without technology before. So that's the field what we're excited about, and I think we potentially see similar opportunities even in warehousing, where we have talked to a couple of entrepreneurs in the past. Like, you're actually amazed like how much underutilization is in warehousing today, and I think technology can play a role in really like building that up again.
Definitely agree with most of your points, and I think just to add to that a little bit, I mean, if we think about investments as a VC, right, you always think about what are the investments that's going to be $1 billion return, and also at the same time can make such a significant difference. So what's really 10x better that's going to make the industry just so different than what it is today, right? And I think supply chain, and I think logistics is a part of that, is actually the fact that it's so complex. So you actually have a huge opportunity to really make a huge difference here. And I think the more complexity there are, the better problem solving that can be really taken up by tech, and therefore there's a lot of opportunities to really make a change in this industry. I mean, just to like, as an anecdote, I mean, even when I was at Apple, it's actually absolutely crazy that a lot of the planning came based on spreadsheets. You know, like we're probably moving billions of dollars worth of inventory across the world, but we're doing allocation planning on Excel, which obviously allows for lots of flexibility, but at the same time shows that there's obviously a lot of opportunity for digitalization. So, you know, I think a combination of really large market and the absolute capability to make a large difference in complex problems make this space really attractive. And I think, you know, very similar to Northzone, I think we're also looking at a couple of opportunities across the space, but I think what's really interesting for me now is actually where do you get actual visibility across the supply chain, right? And I think here is really where I think no one has really solved the problem in a very comprehensive way, right? So even with a lot of kind of technology, no one really ever really knows exactly where their assets are or their products are, whether it's, you know, across the globe or even within their factories or their warehouses. So yeah, that's actually one of the things that I think is pretty interesting.
Cool. I always say cool. On a scale from 1 to 10, where would you say, where do we stand in terms of startups disrupting the logistics incumbents? Is it still super early innings, or are we on the road already? 1 to 10, where do we stand?
I think we're at 1. I mean, it's like when you look at other industries and the advancement of digitization, I think we haven't really seen like a massive success and exit in the logistics space. I mean, there are some like up and coming startups like Flexport leading the charge to some degree in that space, and there are a bunch of companies also like funded in China at very high valuations in the trucking space. Yeah, but it hasn't really like had like a disrupting impact on the industry yet. And I think one of the aspects here in this space is it is just so massive until you actually get really become a problem for some of the big players. It takes a long time. And then the space in general is not one where traditionally, like, the actors are very fast in adopting new technologies. I think that also makes it a bit more complicated for startups to get traction. So I'm super bullish that there will come more, but I think we're very early in the game there.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think probably based on, let's say, two major factors. So I think for one, kind of the fragmentation that you mentioned earlier, I think that's actually very much the reality, right? There's such a high level of fragmentation in the market. So while that leaves a lot of opportunity, I think what's really difficult is actually building scale, right? And actually building scale at a speed that allows you to like really rapidly tackle an industry en masse. I think the second thing is actually, you can't disrupt the unwilling in some ways, right? So obviously a lot of these incumbents, they're, even though everyone says, look, they're kind of really behind digitalization, but there's still a lot of kind of capabilities they have, like economies of scale and just generally running these huge operations, right? So in some parts, if you can't really partner with them and convince them that your technology is actually quite useful, they're not gonna use you. And then if they don't wanna use you, then you really can't disrupt them, right? So, I mean, obviously this is kind of different depending on what exact technology you're targeting at, but I think a combination of how do you scale really fast and how do you get into these large sort of incumbents, not just as a pilot, but as a long-term, delivering a long-term value that's sustainable for them. I think these two things we're still in the very early stages of, and I'm really excited to see kind of what will happen here.
Thanks a lot. I know it's getting late. 2 more questions, I promise, then we're done. So help us see logistics startups through your eyes. How do you evaluate a logistics startup? How do you choose the ones you invest in?
I mean, to be honest, I almost feel like we don't look at logistics startups as a completely different category, right? In some ways, I think how you look at any company and any startup is really agnostic across different industries. So there's always sort of the certainty of, is this a team that we can really back, right? Is this a team that we really believe has the ambition to build a very large business? And I think this, no matter if you're in logistics, you're in mobility, you're in, I don't know, whatever, robotics, let's say, will always be applicable. And then on top of that, I think it goes back to a couple of the points that I made earlier, is the team setup really one that really allows you to be able to penetrate these very large incumbents, right? Do you really have the technical capabilities to, one, build something that actually is so different, but then also have the ability to sell it in a way where people really welcome your technology, right? So I think in terms of what we look for, it's always around the team. How are they really able to work with the major players within the market that they're trying to disrupt? And then obviously, is this product going to have longevity and the ability to really return revenue?
Yeah, I mirror that. I think we very similarly, like, we have like some standards that we want to take in startups in general, not only in the logistics industry. Like, team is one of the most important there. I think specifically for logistics, what I often try to get my head around is defensibility. It's like, to many aspects, like, the space is very very much driven by manual labor. So you can actually get a long way building a company with a lot of like effort and like putting resources behind it, with like a pretty like shallow tech enablement, which is in itself, I think, not defensible. So I think really like deploying technology in these processes to a degree that it's really, really difficult to copy. That's like sometimes the aspect that I'm struggling with in logistics. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on top of that, actually, just the fact that you also cannot really disrupt the existing processes, right? You can't just make a company that's run a certain way for decades to completely change and integrate your technology and then operate in a different way, right? So how do you build something that kind of can still integrate with existing processes, but then also at the same time bring a completely new view of approaching approaching a problem. And I think this is a really interesting dichotomy that's a challenge, but also an opportunity in logistics.
And the last question is, what do you bring to the table apart from money? How do you try to make the startups you pick more successful? What do logistics startups in the room need to know about the way you work with them?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. So, I mean, for us, we're a founder-first fund, right? So what that means is that everyone on our team has either been entrepreneurs or has been operators scaling tech companies. And I think this obviously is important when you work with companies, as the companies will always have ups and downs, right? So I think for us, by not being a pure financial investor, I think we can really understand the pain points of starting a company and really accompany our portfolio founders on a journey and really bring a lot of value and sort of coaching, guidance, things like this. And then on top of that, we're also building a platform. So for us, we're not a pure VC investor in the sense that we write a check and then never see you again, right? So we really want to build a platform where there are people on our team that can actively hire for our portfolio company. So we have a head of HR that actually works with building up the team for our portfolio companies. And we also have a head of platform who's really helping with internal communications, external PR, and just generally building a better brand for our portfolio companies. And I think this is really critical, especially when you're in the early stages. You're really trying to bring up your team, you're really trying to make sure that the world knows about you in a very positive way, and you also want sort of people around you that really can go with you through the ups and downs, and I think this is sort of how we try to differentiate ourselves as well.
Yeah, I think for us it's three things. It's one, and similar to you guys, and I think there's a new breed of VCs that consider themselves very entrepreneurial, and we are also, like most of our investors, have built companies before and exited up to like IPO, etc. So, and I think having been in the trenches and having seen how difficult it is to build a business is just valuable in itself to be a good partner for entrepreneurs. The second thing for us is like we have offices across New York, London, Stockholm, and Oslo, and we are through these like local presences, we are able to support our entrepreneurs with expansion, with local connections, with local knowledge, and we typically get into the company when they really try to push internationally. And I think the last point for us is, I mean, we have been at this for more than around like 22 years, not me personally, but the company. And we have like backed companies from very, very little to very, very big. I think we have done like 7 IPOs, several big trades, sales, like 3 more than $1 billion exits. And I think when you come to our firm or we invest in a company, like you will get access to all that knowledge from these other portfolio companies that have seen and are several steps ahead of you, and I think that is very, very valuable knowledge about like how to scale companies in the right way. Yeah, and those are the 3 things from our perspective.
Thank you very much. Very impressive remarks, and big hands of applause finally. They will still be here. Any questions?